Hello, everyone. So I'm here with a bit of a weird angle, but anyway, that's okay. It's very cold here in Tasmania. I hope you're all doing well. So tonight I'm doing a Ask Me Anything kind of Dharma teaching. So I've got all your questions here, and there's quite a lot. We could be here quite a while. But I just thought first we could start with a bit of a, touching base with meditation. So just become aware of your breath and letting go of the worries of the day. May the day be well and the night be well. May the midday hour bring happiness too. In every minute and every second, may the day and night be well. By the blessings of the triple gem, may all things be protected and safe. May all beings born in each of the four ways live in a land of purity and attain the bodhisattva stages. The countenance of the world honored one like the full moon, or like the arc of the sun shines with the light of clarity, a halo of wisdom, joy and equanimity. Okay, so here we are. So I ask people to give me their questions, and there's quite a few of them. So I hope the people who ask these questions are watching. My intention in doing this Facebook Live, apart from just seeing what's on people's minds, is to start building an online community in terms of a group of people that meets regularly for teachings. And I have a teaching starting this Saturday, Australian time at, I think I said 2 or 3 p.m. I'll post it in the comments later. But it's a private Zoom group. So yeah, I'd really like people to sign up for that. But anyway, please remember when you're consuming Dharma content that to not use it like as if you're watching a YouTube reel or something. Like actually, don't be just walking around doing what you normally do. Like actually try and, especially, this kind of platform with questions and stuff is a little more casual, but especially if you're watching a Dharma talk, try to sit through the whole thing, take notes, remember, give it the proper respect, because Dharma isn't just entertainment. Dharma isn't just more content that you consume while you're trying to get a dopamine hit. We have to honor that. So anyway, here we go. The questions, some of them were very good. So Somebody asked, this is an interesting question, is the absolute authority of the guru necessary? Because it can lead to abuse. So just to clarify, what I say here, I'm not a psychologist. So if you have trauma or mental health issues, you should see a therapist. I'm not a medical expert. I'm not the absolute expert on all things Buddhist. I know what I know after 25 years of being a Buddhist nun. But you should also use your own intelligence and what is good for you, and not blindly follow anyone. And the Buddha said, test the teachings like a goldsmith tests gold in order to determine its purity. So the role of the teacher in different Buddhist traditions is different. So in Theravada Buddhism, the role of the teacher is the Kalyana Mitra, the spiritual friend. And it's a much more egalitarian relationship. It should be based primarily on the written word of the Buddhas, of the Pali Canon of the Buddha, the sutras. And you can do a lot of your own reading and guide yourself. So in that sense, it's probably the most egalitarian relationship in Buddhism. The Kalyana Mitra, you don't have to, if you're a monk or a nun, you have to spend 5 years with your teacher and train with them. But they're just like an older brother or sister that guides you on the path. And by all means, you can take the teachings as your refuge. In Mahayana, the teacher is more like a parent, a benevolent, person whose guidance you follow. And there should be a relationship, a warm, caring relationship like father and son or mother and child. And, the teacher, especially when someone ordains, obviously it's different depending on if you're ordained or if you're not ordained, a monk or a nun or a normal householder yogi. But the relationship should be close and full of respect and mutual warm regard, and both people should examine each other to make sure that they're not going to lead each other astray, that the teacher has compassion, knows the Dharma, has ethical conduct, isn't a hypocrite, and has good knowledge and good practice. The minimum requirement is that they should have bodhicitta, great compassion, because if someone has genuine compassion, they won't harm you, because they're working for the liberation of all beings. But we know that people can go astray when they get a lot of attention and power and money. So if someone who previously didn't have those things and isn't well grounded gets those things and everybody's adoring them, it might go to their head and they might misbehave. And that's why they're meant to have peers and sangha, So there's nothing wrong with leaving if a teacher becomes inappropriate or unethical, or you're not growing with them. But I think it's important to understand the difference between a teacher working on your ego and taking you to those places that are a little bit uncomfortable, showing you where you're blocked. Because one of my teachers gives me quite a hard time, but mostly I trust that it's for my benefit and not for their ego, and that helps me grow. But if it became impossible and abusive, I would have to reassess whether I was staying or going. And the Bodhisattva vows and the Vajrayana vows and the monk's vows, if they're a monk or a nun, should be the guide for their conduct. Most importantly, what the teacher is doing should benefit the student and not exploit the student. So in terms of the guru in Vajrayana, that relationship is very different to Theravada and Mahayana. It's like getting married to someone. And that is why in Vajrayana it says to not examine the student is like jumping off a cliff, and to not examine the teacher is like drinking poison. I can't remember if the analogy is vice versa, but you get the idea of the profoundness and depth and trust required for that relationship. So it's difficult because sometimes, so-called gurus, so-called lamas are just visiting, doing a fundraising tour. You see them once, every 2 or 3 years. You don't actually have a personal relationship with them. And that's why local teachers and traveling to see your teacher are actually really important. Building local communities, local sanghas, and attending a community that you can be part of and ask questions and have a personal relationship with the teacher in some form, as well as maybe a main teacher who's, overseas and only visits once a year. That's why it matters, actually, to have that personal relationship if you're interested in pursuing Vajrayana. It's not easy to find a good guru. We all know the tales of abuse that have arisen. Generally, I would say not all that glitters is gold. So if the teacher is humble and not interested in money and maybe a little bit boring to listen to, they're probably better than someone that everybody's following and, is really charismatic and secretly then carries out affairs in their spare time. And, that kind of relationship you should examine the teacher for, at least 1 or 2 years before you take an initiation from them, and because once you've taken an initiation, you're supposed to see them as embodying the deity and the the source of refuge, basically. The refuge in Vajrayana is Guru Deva Dakini. But the guru is also an archetype for a greater force of wisdom. So I think, if you've had an experience where a guru was abusive or not inspiring, it's okay for them to be human. It's okay for them to be grumpy, but they should be practicing Dharma and walk their talk, But if you have had an experience where you've been betrayed by a guru, which is sadly, it happens. Of course, there are many good teachers as well. Leave, go on to another teacher if you feel that's appropriate for you. And recognize that the guru is an archetype, not just a person. Because everybody has Buddha nature, and at the end of the day, the guru is only a mirror for your own Buddha nature. But in Vajrayana, you absolutely need a guru. In Theravada, you can get along okay for quite a while without a teacher. But having a teacher and having a community should not be underestimated. Just the Buddha said, if a normal tree is growing in a sandalwood forest, it will take on the quality, the smell of that sandalwood tree. So if you have wise spiritual friends, you gain the fragrance of virtue, the fragrance of wisdom, and you gain inspiration. So whether it's an online group or whether it's an in-person groups I think are much better, because there's things I can tell about a person in person, reading their body language, listening to their questions, seeing their facial expressions that I can't see online. And in this age of loneliness, I think, in-person community matters even more. And with the chaos of climate change that is coming, the uncertainty, we're all going to need communities where we can take refuge and grow food and, give each other mutual aid and support. Hello, Venerable Nawang Timpa. So yes, that's one question. There's about 20 more. Does meditation ever become obsolete? Can you be without a tool can you ever just, abide without needing a tool to get somewhere? The Buddha experienced that timeless state of abiding in peace, abiding in the spacious awareness of luminous mind when he sat under the rose apple tree as a boy. He had that moment where he just went into luminous awareness. And some people, who have meditated in their past lives. I think they just slip into that. But I think generally, especially for beginners, it's really helpful to have methods, means, like method and wisdom, right? They're two wings of the bird. So you need some guardrails, to get into this luminous, timeless awareness. And sometimes, and not all medicines work for everybody, because different people have different kinds of personalities and karma. But I find, the breath is really a really good one in the beginning. And even if you've been doing breath meditation for a while, just you could just be aware of the in-breath and not the out-breath. On the out-breath, you can just return to resting in mind, resting in spacious awareness, Or you can say, you'll meditate on a mantra, or visualize a deity if you're following the path of Vajrayana, if you found a teacher in a lineage. Or you can say, like in the Ajahn Chah tradition, they say Buddho, Buddho as a Om Mani Padme Hum is the mantra of compassion, is something everybody can practice. And they could combine that with loving kindness meditation. And sometimes, like, if you're feeling, there's different kinds of meditations for different days, like if you're feeling some really strong karmas rising, you might want to do the Vajrasattva mantra. The short version of that is Om Vajrasattva Hum. And you can find a picture of Vajrasattva, the deity of purification. And you imagine this white nectar emerging from Vajrasattva's body and washing away all the negative, unskillful karma that you've created. Or, loving kindness. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be peaceful and at ease, filled with loving kindness and compassion, and allowing this beautiful, warm, golden light to fill your whole body, or this sense of unconditional love for yourself, and then gradually for a close person like your mother, father, grandparent, and then someone who you don't know that well, like the local barista, and imagine what their life is like and their secret personal challenges, and then for someone you find challenging, and then all beings. So what I'm doing here, I'm not giving an in-depth teaching. I'm giving a, kind of a icebreaker, get to know me. It's hard to give each question the full in-depth information they require, but I'm doing what I can. But yeah, it's important to not become so strategic, so like obsessed with perfection. I've got 4 heads, I've got 4 arms, I'm reading the Abhidharma, that you actually lose the joy and the freedom of just abiding in the present moment, And that's why sometimes going on retreat, doing walking meditation, walking in nature, and just having joy in your practice is really important, to not be so tight. Not too tight and not too loose, just like the string of the Veena. This is the optimum level of tension we need in our practice. Okay, so someone said, early in the morning and late at night, I can feel the potential of my higher self. What practices do you recommend to keep the mind simple and quiet and recognize this state, or grow it maybe? I'm just paraphrasing, but I think it's interesting. In Tibetan Buddhism, we have this thing called bardos, which means an in-between state. And we're always moving from one state to another. We're moving from, the bardo of dreams to the bardo of the daytime, to the bardo of sleep. And then as, when we die, we enter the bardo of the moment before death. And then, the merging, if we're lucky, of the clear light mind, our mind with the Buddha's mind. Most of us will not recognize it and find ourselves in the bardo of rebirth, of intermediate state, the bardo of rebirth. But this moment before sleep and the moment when we wake up, it's almost like being born, isn't it? We come out of this liminal space and we're not we're in between worlds, you know, and we haven't quite cranked up the engine of our, I've got to do this and I've got to do that and I've got to do this. So just, you know, setting up a shrine can be a really nice place to, like, making your room clean and organized, and setting up a shrine, you know, some things like a Buddha statue, some water bowls, or just something, a crystal, something that inspires you, maybe some teacher's picture, some sacred space that if it feels like you want to go there, you know, you feel attracted to it. And just observing the mind, you know. Resting in that. Actually, a really good practice for this is listening to the sound of silence, which is just like, imagine the hum of an old refrigerator, or the sound of a seashell, the sea in a seashell, like a quiet hum. But it's not actually in your ears, it's a vibration, the sound beneath all sounds. And you just hear this silent hum, and your mind becomes spacious. This is more of a subtle object of focus than the breath. But also the breath can just be nice too. And you might, you know, say a prayer or say a mantra that inspires you, that returns you to presence. Waking up this morning, I smile. 24 brand new hours are before me. I vow to live fully in each moment, and to look at beings with the eyes of love. This is a gatha by Thich Nhat Hanh that monks and nuns are supposed to say when they wake up in the morning. I can't say that I always say that. I'm like, oh, another day. Where's my coffee? Okay. Yes. So somebody asked, actually, two people asked this. One person said, you ordained with Thich Nhat Hanh. Why did you choose Vajrayana? And somebody else said, why did you choose Vajrayana and not Theravada and Mahayana? So I'm a bit of a strange animal in the sense that I have moved around in different monasteries because there was no support in Tibetan Buddhism for Westerners, especially women. Their position is very low down, and not, there's like 4 monasteries in the world that don't charge Western monastics to stay there, and 2 of those monasteries are headed by lamas accused of rape. So that's rather unfortunate, although things are changing. And there are now, like, there's places like Sravasti Abbey in America, but there's still really very few places, especially where monastics can study the traditional training, learn the rituals, and live with dignity. So that's why I started staying in Theravadan monasteries. I actually ordained originally with a Tibetan master in the Sakya tradition called Chogi Trijin Rinpoche, who is a wonderful old yogi and very well loved. But he was extremely old. I think he was in his late 70s when he ordained me, and he passed away. I actually went to him once and cried and said, why don't you have any place for us to stay? And he was like, you know, just kind of went like this, like he couldn't organize anything. I think the Tibetans have this kind of refugee trauma, that there was definitely a time in the 70s and 80s when they were extremely poor and they just had no resources to help Westerners. But that is no longer the case. The head lamas, you know, of large monasteries do have enough money to support Western monastics if they so desired. I think they just feel like they want to prioritize their own people, their own community, and they don't want a difficult, independent person who questions things, because the way that you train and support a Western monastic is very different to the way that you train and support someone who is obedient and has been ordained since they were 8 years old, right? So I think Westerners have to just create their own thing. And I think more Westerners really relate to being non-sectarian. Like, for example, several of the monks and nuns I know now, mostly men for some reason, that I know that are ordained in the Tibetan tradition, also go and spend time in Theravadan monasteries and learn the Vinaya, the code of ethics, and going on alms round, and find it really powerful. I personally, I ordained and then went to work on the second day I ordained, and I neither had the freedom of being a layperson nor the support of being a monastic. And I was just doing all this work for the Dharma Center, and I was, the Dharma Center was run for the needs of lay people. My teacher was a lovely man. He was a monk, but he wasn't really interested. He just didn't think it was possible to support the people he'd ordained. But to me, that was just such a devastating choice that was made without consulting us. And they spent $50,000 on statues, and they kept telling us Western monastics who were running the temple that there wasn't enough money to support us. So for me, their priority was concrete Buddhas, not turning humans into Buddhas. When I ordained, I didn't realize I'd be taking on and living within the system of Tibetan culture, which is feudal and patriarchal, where nuns occupy the lowest place, because at least lay women are respected somewhat in Tibetan culture because they go and earn money, usually by engaging in commerce. Whereas nuns are right at the bottom of the pile because they're not economically productive and they're not consorts, So that's changing. But, to realize and understand that was the place that I now occupied, and see people bringing food to my teacher every day, and actually, like us Western monastics, would run out of food. It was so depressing, to be in a place where your labor isn't appreciated, your potential, it's just like, Annie La, auntie, will you please go and wash the toilet? That was pretty much and say Om Mani Padme Hum. That was how, that was, we were just regarded as like either a financial burden or free labor. So I went to Theravadan centers, and I found monks and nuns had much more dignity there. And I found the living in a hut in the forest to be a really powerful way of practicing. And I found this wonderful mentor, Bhante Sujato, who is a feminist monk who helped revive full ordination for women. So I've spent, months of my life staying in Theravadan communities, and they're the ones that I still go and visit to teach. Tibetan centers see me as a pariah, to be honest. Many, not all, because I'm outspoken about abuse and patriarchy. But I also have a Tibetan Lama, not a Tibetan, a Western scholar of Buddhism, scholar/yogi, who prefers to keep his identity private because he's a hidden yogi, but he belongs to the Nyingma tradition, which this is a recent relationship that I've had for the last 2 years. So I guess now I find myself going more in the direction of Nyingma Dzogchen practices. But I did spend many years studying the Sakya school of Tibetan Buddhism. I also, I also practiced as a layperson with Plum Village Sangha, and Thich Nhat Hanh. I really love the Bodhisattva vow. For me, that's the main thing of where practice is at. So I love Thich Nhat Hanh's engagement and the way he makes the teachings accessible to lay people, and he doesn't lose the profundity of the teachings, but he explains them in a very simple way. I really believe he was a bodhisattva. I also think his Sangha is the best at building community. They really value monks and nuns, but they also value lay people's potential. and they have a lot of equality. They have a lot of dignity and, love in the way they organize their community. But I guess I felt that the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism were very profound and rich, so that's philosophically, I prefer the way that forest monasteries are run. I prefer, that monks and nuns are not just servants for lay people's dharma centers, but actually contemplatives, meditators, and that they have time to develop their own practice and individual time to practice, because I feel, Westerners are actually more suited to individual practice and maybe coming together half the day, but also having that private time alone, because that's how our culture is. We're quite individualistic. So we're more suited to that kind of, we need that alone time. Whereas the way Tibetan monasteries are run is more like a high school. It's more like a high school or a university. Whereas Westerners need a mix of meditation and study. So I feel like the Theravadan monastic lifestyle is more suited to Westerners, and it's probably more close to what the Buddha originally taught. But I feel like the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism are really profound. Yeah. I grew up Catholic, as well. So, and I'm a maximalist. I love, I think more is more. I love complexity. You can see my shrine. My shrine is so many deities. So good. Yeah. I just feel like there's a real richness in the Tibetan tradition, and the appeal of bodhicitta is so profound. The rich philosophy that they've carried over from India, from the Nalanda tradition. But I also really love the direct cutting through of Dzogchen, which I feel like has more of a Zen flavor, but it's its own thing. And also I like the deity practice of Tibetan Buddhism. I find those archetypes, it's more like a devotional thing that I find quite attractive. And also, but for me, the bodhicitta, for me, practice without bodhicitta, great compassion, the wish to become a Buddha and liberate all beings, is very dry. Whereas bodhicitta gives me the enthusiasm I need to face my own darkness. Okay, what is your daily life like as a nun? So we wake up early usually, and we meditate for a few hours. Depends if I have guests or not. And then I'll have breakfast. I might share breakfast with lay people if they're here, or if there is someone training to be a monk or a nun, I'll have breakfast with them. And then we might do some more teachings and meditation together, some communal practice, then some study, some reading of Dharma books, maybe watching an online Dharma talk, and then lunch, which we share in silence, mindfulness. And then and we might, in the morning, we might also do some work in the garden or something, or some building if there's something that needs to be done. And then after that, we'll go back to our huts and do our own practice. And people can go on a bushwalk, or they can journal, or, if they need to go to town and do something, they can do something. I sometimes have responsibilities for my charity in India. And I often also make posts on Facebook about various activist issues, or, guiding my students, or just people will message me, people message me every day with issues as well. And sometimes I'll meet my teacher who lives close by, or I might host my own teaching on every second Sunday at the monastery in Tasmania. So all of those things. Or sometimes, like 3 months of a year, I go to India and I stay with my little nuns and my lay sangha there. Or sometimes I'll travel to the desert, or a retreat with one of my mentors. Like recently I went to the desert in Broken Hill with Bhante Sujato. So that was wonderful. Okay. And, we have guests coming on the weekend as well. So we're usually quite busy with that when guests come, especially in summer. Um, I have like 2 huts here, so people come and visit. Okay. So what, yeah, but being a nun in the West is not an easy thing, because you putting on robes makes you invisible, but makes people think that you're suddenly an expert in Dharma and that you need to be perfect. And people will have massive expectations, but Westerners often will not financially support you. Um, so you're like some kind of unpaid therapist or someone in spiritual drag. Um, the expectations are high, but the support is minimal, and it can be isolating. So it's really good if you are thinking of ordaining to spend time in a monastery and make sure that you have a sangha, that you have some kind of moral support, because you need a certain level of confidence to live a different life to the rest of society. Okay. How old was I when I ordained? I was 23, and I'm now 49. 49 on the 30th of June. 25 years. Half my life, pretty much. Can we follow the path of the Bodhisattva deeply without a teacher or a guru? Is loving intention enough? I think you need to use your own wisdom here. I just realized my camera is a little bit crooked. It takes a while to find the lineage that you like and to find a teacher that you like. And you don't want to get involved in a cult, so familiarize yourself with the red flags of what a cult is. And it's okay to have more than one teacher. But having a good teacher can definitely accelerate your practice and give you inspiration, as well as the support of a sangha. But especially in the beginning, I think it's okay to take the Dhamma as your refuge, read the Pali Canon. You can find it online at Sutta Central, Sutta, S-U-T-T-A, Sutta Central. It's all free. Or you can get the Majjhima Nikaya translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi. But I think having a community to practice with is really powerful. And it's okay to try a few different ones before you commit. And also just be aware that there are people who've taken a 1-month mindfulness course and set themselves up as teachers. So be a little bit discerning about, someone calling themselves a Dharma teacher, the depth of their practice, if they've got the blessings of a lineage, if they've got a depth of practice, But I think eventually it is good to go deeper and stick to a lineage for a while and just see if it works, if it's, because if you're taking in the beginning it's okay to shop around and maybe the first 6 months or a year, but then just try to stick with the practice for a while and give it time to work and understand that it's a lifetime of practice. But just try to let the Dharma change you instead of you changing the Dharma, It's okay if you're not ready to accept something like future lives or deities or whatever, to just put it on the shelf, but keep an open mind. There might come a time where you will find that you're ready for that, or that's appealing, But also, I think it's important that we not asset strip the Dharma, and just like, cool, I did a mindfulness course and now I'm going to just immediately set myself up as a mindfulness teacher and try and make money out of Buddhism because I don't like my normal job. Like, don't turn something beautiful that's communal and by donation into something that you're trying to hustle, It loses something in translation. And especially the people that just take the Dharma and then give it a different name and never give any credit to the Buddha, like they've poisoned the spring. They've taken the Dharma, they've asset stripped it, they've watered it down, to the point where this is a controversial topic, and it relates to a question that someone else asked. I mean, the benefit of mindfulness, of secular Buddhism, is that it gets more people into Dharma. And there are definitely people that would never come to a monastery or a traditional Buddhist center because they don't like religion. So in that sense, mindfulness being taught is a good thing. So I'd say it's a good thing, but it's also got a dark side. And the shadow side of that is that it becomes commodified, that altruism, community, and ethics are stripped from it. So I know some really lovely mindfulness or insight teachers who have not stripped those things from Buddhism, and they're just doing a very nice, simple practice with their Sangha, and those people are really lovely and open-minded. But I also have seen, like, a kind of corporate mindfulness where instead of paying the workers a just wage, they get in a mindfulness teacher and then say, okay, you've had a mindfulness course, so you can deal with stress, so you shouldn't complain about working 60 hours a week for a low wage anymore. So that's like weaponizing mindfulness. Or even I heard of using mindfulness to spiritually bypass your emotions, to focus, to do something appalling like being one of those people in the army that do the sharpshooting. I heard they were using that in the army to make people follow their breath so that they didn't have to feel the moral implications of what they were doing. And that really shocked me. So I think, and we can see sometimes in Buddhist communities where there's spiritual bypassing, where people are using the breath to just calm themselves and numb out instead of dealing with difficult feelings. They think, I just want to feel peaceful. I don't want to have any difficulties. But actually practice is opening up to messy things. It's not just having peace. Peace can be a nice thing in the beginning, like you need some peace, you need to suffer less so that you can open up to your own suffering. But eventually we have to open Pandora's box and start dealing with our defilements and, cutting down the delusions and the self-grasping and the misapprehension of reality. Otherwise, we're just going to endlessly go round and round in samsara, isn't it? So pros and cons, but I think it's really important that people who are teaching mindfulness acknowledge that it does come from Buddhism, or acknowledge that they're not teaching the complete path of the Buddha, that they're just teaching stress relief, and that's what it is. And also, I'm not saying all mindfulness is just stress relief. I'm just saying that people who are teaching stress relief need to be clear that that's what it is. And also, maybe now and then think about supporting the source of these teachings and keeping that alive and investing in the fourfold community of monks, nuns, lay women, laymen, and not just saying, great, I've got this precious gift from the Buddha, but I'm just going to take it and try and make money out of it and not even care about where it comes from, or community, or altruism, or, making it accessible to poor people or anything like that, So think about the ethics of it and where it comes from, and give it its due, give, understand, like insight is just one gem in the precious crown of the Buddhist teachings. It's not the be all and end all. Yes. There's an eightfold path, right? Ethics, generosity, beloved community, compassion. These things are also very important. Okay, so I would say, if you can find a teacher, it's good. But if you find a bad one, just get the hell out of there. Be very careful. Be very, vigilant about abuse. Just, if you can, please avoid having sex with gurus. It's just, unless you're, a very advanced practitioner and you've realized emptiness, just avoid it. Avoid having relationships with your teacher. And if you do happen to fall in love with your teacher, and they're in love with you, make sure it's monogamous and make sure the Sangha knows and they're no longer your teacher anymore. because the power differential, it's not good. Yeah. So, can nuns live alone? Yes. But when you train the first 5 years, you should be with a community. And there are prerequisites to ordination, such as you should be debt-free. Most monasteries will only accept people who are in good physical health. Some monasteries won't accept people below, above 50, 55 or 50 years old, because monasteries usually tend to have very few resources in the West. So for a Sangha to be viable, the amount of time it takes to train someone, they need someone who can serve the Sangha for the longest period of time. I know that's a big can of worms, but I don't particularly want to go into that right now. Okay, do nuns go on walking pilgrimages like the peace monks? Yes. Like if you look at Ayya Tathaloka's page, AYY, if you just Google Ayya Tathaloka, AYYA she did a tudong. She's a nun in California. She did a tudong, walking around with a bowl and just relying on the kindness of strangers to get support. So nuns do quite often do that. My friend Ayya Vimala did a tudong in California, I believe, or somewhere near Oregon. I do tudong in Launceston farmers markets sometimes, but I don't go on. Like I did the Camino in Spain, which was amazing, but I'm not like a super austere nun who goes with no money and a tent. I'm a bit more of a not quite so renounced nun. Okay. Why do nuns seem less... Sorry, my internet is a bit unstable. Someone said, why do nuns seem less equal when all beings have the same nature? This is a really good question. Patriarchy. Unfortunately, patriarchy is part of society, and monks sometimes rewrote the Dharma to suit their own insecurities. The Buddha did say some sexist things, but you've got to remember it was 2,600 years ago. And for his time, he was pretty ahead of his time. He accepted women into the Sangha, although he initially expressed some concern because the monks were living under trees in the open. They had nowhere safe to put women. Unfortunately, women tend to get attacked by men. So he was worried about where he would put them, the safety, and what it would mean, like in terms of, monks trying to be celibate, having women around, how would they deal with their own desires? Like having nuns just made his life more complicated, basically. There's a lot of people doing a lot of work to try and revive the full ordination for women has been revived. For the first time in 1,000 years of Himalayan Buddhism, 2 batches of nuns fully ordained nuns have been ordained in Bhutan. A lot of Western women scholars and nuns and senior Himalayan nuns have lobbied for the Geshe-ma degree, and like the level of studies for Tibetan nuns has vastly improved. And also, some Buddhists, especially in America, I know that Spirit Rock was really instrumental in helping Ayya Ananda Bodhi and Ayya Santachita move from Chithurst Monastery that refused nuns full ordination to America, where they were given full ordination and started monasteries in their own right. So things are changing. And, if you look at the papers written by Sakyadhita, which is an organization, International Women's Buddhist Organization, you can see that women's voices are improving. There are a lot of inspiring householder yogini teachers like Roshi Joan Halifax, and there's a lot of there's people of color like Lama Rod Owens, and there's just teachers who are emerging with more diversity. But yes, and how do we end the sexism? We support nuns. We support the underdog, basically. Nuns get only about 20% of the support monks do. I can tell you that for sure. I've very much struggled as a nun. It took me 20 years of saving to start the monastery I have in Australia. And I used to sleep in cars and garden sheds, and that's why I spent 17 years in an Indian slum, because the Indian people embraced me, whereas the Australian people would tell me to get a job, to get real. Okay, so someone said, what is the difference in the life between a Theravadan, Mahayana, and Vajrayana nun? I mean, the best way to understand that is just go and stay at the monasteries, the different monasteries, and see how it is. Yeah. Theravadins, I think, especially in the forest tradition, they have a lot more time for their practice. Although, if they're in a really popular monastery, they can also be quite busy. And the more senior you are in ordination, the more busy you are in terms of training young monastics and giving retreat for lay people. A lot of Tibetan Buddhist nuns in the West are older women with their own resources, because no one with no money can, if you're young and you have no savings, it's really hard to find a place where you can ordain. I welcome people to ordain. Come on down if you're mentally stable and like cold places. And it also depends on the culture that you ordain in. Like a Chinese temple is a place where you'll probably never be alone, and there's always some activity to do as a community, because that is how Chinese culture runs. People like to stay busy and they like to practice together. And for some Westerners, that's really difficult. I know some Westerners that studied in Korean temples. Korean monastics are very impressive, but their monasteries are also very strict and very disciplined. And Vajrayana, I think Vajrayana, monastics are still finding their way, because they don't fit in with the Tibetan system, which is training kids from 8 years old, learning by rote, debate. Although there's places like Chenrezig Institute in Queensland where they have a fairly traditional study program, I feel like Westerners probably need to return to a more non-sectarian, a mix of study and practice, And I also think that, so anyway, every monastery will have a different emphasis depending on the teacher and depending on the lineage and depending on the culture. The cultural context also makes a huge difference. Do you have to shave your hair as a nun? Yes. There's 3 things you change when you're a monastic. You change your hair, your name, and your mind. There is the possibility of being like a Zen priest, which means you're kind of in between a monastic and a lay person. You're a very serious, or you could be a nakpa, a very serious yogi. These are all levels, and in the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order, you could be a Dhammacharini or a Dhammacharya, I think, which is like a really serious practitioner of their lineage. Like, for example, Roshi Joan Halifax will sometimes shave her head and sometimes have long hair, but she's not a monastic Vinaya-based nun. She's a priest, a Zen teacher. The Japanese Zen lineage lost the Vinaya-based celibacy lineage, whereas you will find in Tibetan Buddhism, in Chinese Zen, Korean Zen, and Theravada Buddhism, and Vietnamese Buddhism, you'll find the Vinaya-based lineage of ordination from the Buddha. Inequality turns many women off from ordaining. Can we move away from a patriarchal model? God, I hope so. That's what I'm trying to do. My monastery is Men are welcome, but it is a woman-focused monastery. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to have tough conversations about how entitlement can lead to abuse, how patriarchy cuts women off from reaching their enlightened potential, and how it's well past time that things changed. And the way to change that is to support women teachers, because we rely on students and we struggle to get support. What would the Buddha say if he saw the modern world, and how does what is happening now reveal his teachings? The Buddha would, Buddhists say that the Buddhas appear in the world like constantly awakened beings. This is a Tibetan Buddhist view. The Theravadan view is the Buddha appeared in the world and now he's gone, and in the future there'll be another Buddha. Excuse me. But the Tibetan Buddhists say that the Buddhas appear in the world just like a moon reflects in different bodies of water. Different emanations, enlightened beings appear in the world for the benefit of beings to try and wake them up. And they could be all kinds of things. They could be a fruit seller. They could be a refugee child. They could be a social worker. You just never know who's a Buddha, and that's why you should be nice to everyone. Sorry, I'm just getting more comfortable. And I guess on an ultimate level, the world is like a dream, just like a dream experience. Whatever things I enjoy will become a memory. Whatever is past will not be seen again. The Buddhas neither wash ill deeds away with water nor remove being sufferings with their hands. So, for people with purified perception, this is already a Buddha field, but that's a long way off for most of us. I think the Buddha was not into greed. He preached moderation, and compassion and ethical leadership. So I think, most people who practice Dharma can see that capitalism is not sustainable and is bad for the planet. And the Buddha also spoke against war and exploitation and slavery, and harming beings. So he'd probably be quite sad about what's going on in the world, and try to wake people up. But you also have to accept that people sometimes, you can give them good advice and they won't listen, So we keep them in our prayers. Okay, so this is the teaching that I was kind of half answered before. Somebody asked, what do you think of the monetization of the teachings? Should we just support monastics, or can it benefit the world to have Buddha's teachings under new titles? It could engage more people on the path. So I think, like I said, both of those things are true, that on one hand, it can water down the teachings. Because I've met people who are like secular Buddhists and they're literally doing Vipassana meditation and they're like, this isn't the teaching of the Buddha. This is just a timeless teaching on awareness. And it's like, dude, read the Buddhist texts and understand what you're practicing, and give the source its due. But I also recognize that there are people who are not going to feel comfortable embracing traditional Buddhism. So, if secular Buddhism is good for them, then why not? Someone meditating, someone getting insight, someone following the path of Dharma, even if it's just a little bit, is still a good thing, better than nothing, right? But like I said, just look at what is the difference between mindfulness-based stress reduction. Does that lead to liberation? No, it leads to stress relief. Versus insight meditation, or, a more vast and profound complete teachings. The complete teachings are available. You just need to find them. Like I said, the Pali Canon, Sutta Central. lots of good teachers around, There is also, like, if you want to make sure that the teacher you're following is not a cult leader or accused of abuse. Obviously, not every teacher accused of abuse is abusive, but you've got to do your own research. There is a really good website called Buddhism and Difficult Issues. And that lists, questionable organizations. Okay, what is somebody, I don't know how relevant this is to most of the people here, but somebody asked, most sadhanas, like Vajrayana practice, have the deity Vajradhara or Samantabhadra. Which of these is better? They're the same. They have the same essential nature. Samantabhadra is used more in the Nyingma school, and Vajradhara is used by the later schools like Sakya, Kagyu, Nyingma as the archetypal original Buddha. Samantabhadra is the original Buddha that never left perfect awareness, whereas Vajradhara represents someone who entered samsara, made great effort, and attained liberation, and then became an archetypal guru Buddha. But they have the same nature, so I wouldn't worry too much. If you're a student, can you take refuge? Oh, if you're some lama's heart student, can you take refuge with another lama? Yes, you can. But if you have a really close relationship with a teacher and you're getting good things from them, I would just question why you feel a need to go to another teacher. I think Westerners, we're just so sometimes we're a bit greedy for advanced teachings, and we're not patient. We won't do the work. We get bored, and we, go to some other teaching, some other more exciting, I'm doing this deity and then I'll do that deity. And it becomes like a form of spiritual materialism. So I think sticking with a teacher and a practice, and not prematurely going on to something you're not ready for is a good thing. But if you're genuinely, you really feel a need, like some teacher has some really precious teaching and you feel you're ready for that and you would benefit from it, then I think it's okay. But I think just try not to, have that restless mind of just shopping around, and because you actually make more progress if you stick to one form of practice and one teacher guiding you, if they're a good teacher and you have a karmic connection with the lineage. What is the feeling of, I can't read this, my own writing. I don't think I can read that. Okay. Somebody asked, what is the ontological or the being experience of practice and keeping vows versus the rational idea of practice and keeping vows or walking the path? It's not an easy question. I mean, I think the Dhamma is like medicine, and it just fills you up and gradually dissolves the rough edges, the places you're stuck. It's not always comfortable, and sometimes you can trick yourself to think you're practicing Dhamma, but you're actually just creating a spiritual ego. And that's where having a teacher can be useful. I mean, I think it's also really important to take your Dhamma practice from your head, from knowledge, to real practice, to work with. And that's why, I mean, Vajrayana has many pitfalls, but Vajrayana can also be very profound because it's working with the energies of the body and the channels and the drops and the unconscious parts of ourself. It's like working, almost like restructuring our entire being. So that's a very intuitive process that's hard to describe. basically your mind just becomes more spacious and joyful, and you get a bit of a sense of humor and don't take yourself quite as seriously. Yeah. And then you can have, deep, profound experiences of bliss, but, that usually requires practicing many hours every day. But, don't feel despair. It's important to not feel despair, like, oh, I have to work and I can't practice. Just do what you can. And if you do what you can die without regret, and do good deeds, be generous, be kind, help people where you can, do good deeds, and eventually, and simplify your life. And eventually, awakening will be there. Okay. Can we move away from a patriarchal model of Buddhism? Yes. It's hard though, because all the lineage holders and the people with power, like the closer you get to the power and the tradition, it's all men. So, that's where people who start Dharma centers need to prioritize, having scholarships for women and making sure that people of color, disabled people, poor people are welcome, and it's accessible, and they've done their work around awareness of, what life is like, addressing privilege, basically, what life is like for, like doing some anti-racism, LGBTQIA awareness, feminist awareness, just to make sure that they're accessible, and championing, like your committee should be half women or non-binary, including non-binary people. Your the events you organize should have different voices, be diverse. But just having someone there as a figurehead, don't just have them there as a figurehead, have them there because you deeply respect diverse voices. But we need to support female teachers, or otherwise we won't have any. And a teacher just doesn't drop out of the sky. A teacher takes years of training, which means financial support and resources and access to the lineage, and interrupting the absolute power, of gurus sometimes, because sometimes they have their own agenda, which is rebuilding the culture they lost in Tibet, which is okay, but maybe not our agenda, not what we need to preserve the Dharma in the West. Okay. What can men do to balance the scales against misogyny? What I just said. Do you ever worry about the future or regret the past? Yes. I feel very sad for our children, that they will inherit climate crisis, and that some of the great democracies of the world are becoming fascist regimes, deporting refugees, immigrants who made those countries great, whose labor built the foundation that, our democracies stand on. I worry about the world and the growing inequality and I have a girls' home. I have a foster daughter in India. My friends and students live in a slum. So I know it's now so hot in Nagpur in India that they have to, the children have to go to school online and not in person because it's 47 degrees in the schoolyard. We're destroying the planet, we're like the logic of the cancer cell is what capitalism is. So I do believe in acting in person in the world for justice, but I also believe in not exhausting ourselves and having a level of activism that is sustainable. Do I regret the past? Yes. We all have to battle our own demons, our own trauma, our own laziness, the challenges that our life brings us. And I've not had an easy life. But we have to be kind to ourselves and maybe just keep walking forward. And try to transform the root of suffering in the mind, as well as working for justice outside. But you can't put your mental peace on the day that Trump will be out of office or the day that women will no longer be oppressed, because then you'll never be at peace. But what you can do is, create small circles of beloved community and, moral support for each other. It's really hard to change on a vast scale, especially now that, billionaire oligarchs control so much of the world. But what we can do is mutual aid and small, loving communities. And returning to simplicity, growing our own food, partaking less in unethical corporations. Not saying all corporations are unethical, but many are. Many fund climate change. Okay, someone said, does the mind stream continue after death? If the mind stream is always changing, then how is it that people can remember their past lives? So according to Buddhism, the mind stream does continue after death. The mind stream has continuity, right? Just like the river Ganga starts at Gangotri in the ice, and then it becomes a small mountain stream, and then it flows, then it becomes like a bigger, more tumultuous stream, and then it becomes like this big, brown, vast river that goes through northern India, and then it reaches the ocean. You can never put your foot in the same river twice, and yet the river has continuity. You can remember who you were when you were 5, but you're also not the same person you were when you were 5. So the seeds of karma, until the seed is resolved, nothing is lost, only transformed, until the seed of karma has ripened, the continuity of rebirths will continue. So there is still continuity, even though we are in a constant state of change. These two things do not contradict each other. Do we have free will? Who controls... do we have free will? And who controls things? Or is life just random? We have a degree of free will, in terms of we can't change the karmic actions we did in the past that we've accumulated over countless lifetimes, but we can, in this present moment, we can change our mental habits. We can divest ourselves from greed, hatred, and delusion, practice generosity, ethics, non-violence, loving kindness, justice, and we can choose to do the right thing even when it's difficult. Who controls life? It's like... but you could also say, just to go back to the previous point, that samsara is not completely... we're not... New Age philosophy says that we choose to come to this world and appear to learn things. But Buddhist philosophy says we're taking rebirth with no choice uncontrollably. And if you look at your life, it's not all crystals and mantras, is it? There's a lot of unpleasant elements in the world, and that's mostly because people have delusion, and they're acting out of delusion and blindness, and they don't understand the sacred luminous nature of their mind. So they're acting out of self-serving, greed, fear, desire, and so on. So in that way, they're bound by karma and delusion, not just joy and bliss and coming to the world to learn things. Although bodhisattvas, highly realized beings, appear in the world to benefit others. Who controls life? So collective karma, the people in Australia have a certain kind of karma. The people in India have a certain shared communal karma. So often we do things as a group and then we have a shared karma. So we create numerous worlds with our karma, with our intentions. Yeah. But it's not just our minds, it's also like elements combining, as well. Because relative existence is still there. Life isn't, according to Buddhism, life isn't totally random. Life is mostly, but we shouldn't blame ourselves or other people. We should try to purify our mind and take some responsibility. But we shouldn't judge people for their suffering or being disabled or something like that, because it's not compassionate. And we all have lifetimes of karma that could ripen any minute. Any minute we could become poor or disabled or, die. Like all of us are living in this suffering samsara. So we should, instead of using karma as an idea to judge people, understand karma means action. So if we want to change the conditions of our life, we can gradually plant good seeds and purify unwholesome ones. But that doesn't mean that we definitely should work for a better world, because if someone is in slavery or in human trafficking or sex slavery or sexual abuse or poverty or starvation, they can't practice Dharma, right? So we should, everybody is the result of psychological, social, cultural, economic, spiritual conditions, just like a seed. So if you change their circumstances, they can also grow and evolve, right? So we should try to create the most ideal conditions for people to reach their human potential. What about crazy wisdom? What about crazy wisdom? Yeah, I'm not a fan of Chogyam Trungpa. I think he was abusive. I think Shambhala did a lot of really harmful things. But that doesn't mean that there weren't good people in the organization as well. I think Pema Chodron is quite a good teacher, but I would be very dubious to recommend anyone to go to Shambhala because of the history of abuse of multiple women there, women and children. I'm not saying Trungpa didn't benefit some people, but I feel like the harm he did was much more than that. Crazy wisdom, I think crazy wisdom is applicable when you're a highly realized bodhisattva who is testing their samadhi and their realization of emptiness by doing socially shocking things and ruining their reputation, to realize emptiness, basically. And it's a way, it's also a way we encounter dakinis, which is cutting through non-conceptual self-clinging duality. So if used by someone who has pure bodhicitta, it can be beneficial. But if used by someone who has narcissism or the dark cluster personalities, it can be really harmful. That's why you should really examine the guru and the organization and do some proper research before you dive in and, study and take an initiation and so forth. If you know what you know now, would you do it all over again? I'm not really sure what this question means. Do I want to come back to samsara? Not really. Would I, if I was a highly realized bodhisattva? Sure. Do I want to see all beings liberated? Absolutely. I have a feeling I'm probably going to have to take rebirth. Okay. What is the meaning of mu? M-U. Mu is from Zen Buddhism. Mostly I think it's used in Korean Buddhism, Korean Zen. Mu means emptiness. Emptiness, it's a very big topic. It just means everything is interconnected, and We're empty of a permanent, unchanging self, but we still have a relative existence. And emptiness is not just nothingness or voidness. It's all of its creation in a vast net of interbeing. So mu is a way of cutting through conceptuality, self-grasping. It's a space of openness where true awareness and responsiveness arise. And sometimes these koans can be a way of kind of driving yourself crazy. You repeat something so many times to the point where your brain just becomes so frustrated it just gives up. Like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Or just these unanswerable, impossible questions that make you feel crazy until your mind and your conceptual framework just collapse, and then luminous awareness is shining through. But it's, this path of koans is not for everyone. Yeah. Okay, so I think it's probably almost time to finish. Does anyone have any other questions? Anyone watching? Type with your little thumbs very quickly. I'm really sorry that my internet connection is a bit garbage. Just to remind you that the reason I'm doing this is, I might do more in future, but that I want to start a private online Dharma group to do more in-depth teachings and practice together, maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks. And, everybody always, they'll go from one Dharma talk to another Dharma talk, but there's actually a sequential way of practice that you develop your practice, and you start from the beginning and you progress. And that's what I'm interested in, starting an online group. This Saturday, the first teaching is at 3. So it's live and in person. It won't be posted on YouTube. If you are interested and you have a larger group of people you want me to teach, you can just private message me. But if not enough people turn up for this teaching, I probably won't. It won't happen. So nobody has any questions. I don't see anything here. Okay, so thank you for watching, and to the people who watch later, may you be happy, may you be well, be kind to yourself, may you find the path of liberation, may the precious mind of compassion not yet born arise and grow, may that born have no decline, but increase more and more, in the land surrounded by snow mountains, you the source of all happiness and goodness, all powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May all beings be happy. So if you are interested in joining the teaching on this Saturday, I will put my email and you can email me and just make the donation for the class, and I'll send you the Zoom link. And if you are in financial difficulty, you can also message me and explain your situation. And if you want to make a donation for this Dharma talk, you are most welcome. I will put the website also in the comments. Take care. Thanks for watching.